Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Latino Vote podcast, coming to you live from a warehouse in an undisclosed location in Chicago, Illinois. Mike Madrid, I don't want to hear any jokes about a boat dock or me being kicked out of the convention last night for throwing off my shirt after Michelle Obama shucked it right on down to the cob.
I was going to say, when you're in a warehouse in Chicago at a D.N.C. convention, it sounds like a union thing, but let's just set that aside for the moment. How are things going there in Chicago, Chuck? You're there. You've been a part of the festivities there at the Democratic National Convention. It sure looks like the momentum is at its peak from television land, but how's it feel there on the floor?
Well, first of all, you should know that you're missed, and I walk around taking credit for all of your work, but none of your hateful tweets. So everybody's like, where's Mike Madrid? Are y'all going to be recording a podcast? And I'm like, is somebody checking on him? He seems awful angry. And I'm like, all of those things are correct. Mike couldn't make it, but I'm his stand-in. And so lots of folks have been asking about you. It's like old home week. I remember when me and you get on this podcast and pontificate about how long we've been doing this. Yeah. These conventions remind me how long we really been doing this. Wow. I've been walking around with my new wife, Ebony Payne, and everybody's been walking up to us and she's like, do you actually know everybody here? And I'm like, half of them. I know half of them. And half of them really think I'm the best thing ever and the other half hate me.
Yeah.
That's relatable.
That's the best part of conventions. I don't know that I would get out of that convention alive, the Democratic National Convention, but it's probably worse for me at the Republican convention at this point. So I don't know. I will say I'm incredibly impressed that you decided to honeymoon at the D.N.C. Chuck was just married in Hawaii. The photos were beautiful. It looked amazing. And you got on a plane as quick as you could to get to Chicago to take your bride to listen to political speeches and conventioneer. And I just think that's just the most romantic.
Wait. Just know that this is going to cost me a bazillion. You know, that's my word. $1 bazillion after the election to take her somewhere that neither one of us can afford to go as a payback for having to haul her to the DNC on our mini moon, as we called it. We did stay a few more days to try to get some quiet time. She goes, when she walked in the door, she said, man, this is much different than where we were. And I'm like, this is exactly why I should retire, because it was so much quieter where we were at. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about the convention. Thanks, everybody, for all your nice messages about the wedding. It was great. It was wonderful. We'll talk about it at a later time. But let's talk about the convention. The convention has been really good. Last night was epic. And when I say epic, I've seen a few of these things. Mike Madrid's seen a few of these things. I've been to every Democratic convention, virtually or in person, since 1996, when I was the youngest delegate from the state of Texas to the last Chicago convention in 1996 for the re-election of Bill Big Daddy Clinton.
Wow. When you mentioned your age, I was thinking it was more like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but that's all right.
No. This is the one I was officially at.
Too. But if you're the youngest delegate, like Joe Biden must have been in his fourth term or something.
Just like that. So I've seen some things and I've seen some speeches, and I was at the Obama speech in Massachusetts that really broke him out years ago. Bill Burton on Twitter last night said, let's remember that when he actually gave that speech, he was only 43 when he gave that, when he was the delegate from Illinois here where I'm at. But anyway, it's been really exciting. And what a change. I think that's the biggest difference, I would say, from where me, the party, Mike Madrid, the Latino vote, everything that has anything to do with politics. I mean, we can debate. We'll go and talk about it on this podcast today about where we are and what this means. But the biggest single difference, and we don't know the answers yet, so y'all keep in your seats. But what effect it's going to have, there's one thing I know, is that there's just more energy. Is that going to relate into more vote? Latino vote is back. Black vote is back. We're going to win. We're going to lose. I just know that there's just a palpable, I think I said that right, more energy around everything. 30 days ago, I was having to call Democrats not to jump off the top of buildings.
Yeah.
Now we're having the Obamas give speeches where I ripped off my shirt last night and did the Macarena.
Yeah. You can feel the energy. It's a totally different place. We'll talk about the numbers in just a second, but you'd definitely rather be in this place than where the Democrats were a month ago. And the numbers are moving. It's just undeniable. The base is consolidated. She's pulled into this lead. There's work to do. Everyone knows that. There's a ways to go. But the trajectory is right. The direction is right. And I think the feel is probably right. I mean, from at least, again, I haven't seen it. Well, there's still ways to go on this convention, too. But this has been one of the more successful, energetic conventions I've seen probably since 2008.
Yeah, and I saw it. And it's not just the Obamas. Michelle Lujan Grisham, a Latina governor, gave a great speech last night. And I'd also want to give a hat tip and an acknowledgement to this convention. On the first night, the AOC was a good speech. Like, AOC got up. Now, this is Democratic Socialist Party of America, all the things the right wing like to say about AOC. You watch what AOC is doing. Like, AOC's had Joe Biden's back. Now she's all in with Kamala.
Yeah.
And she got a prime time speaking slot and got up and just owned it. Like, little things like that, because I've been at these conventions, are things that kind of make me think. Like, her speech was really special. You can see her moving to the more middle of the party. Not that she was anything that she wasn't. She hasn't run away from her values, and she represents her district. Mike talks about this, and I talk about this. She represents New York City. Her district's very liberal. She represents them well and gets elected in the Queens. But her speech was really good. And I'm looking forward to what will come tonight and tomorrow night. But right now, it's been a real shot in the arm. And I said this morning, Mike, and I'd like to get your take, is that it's not just the convention. The same old folks who watch all these conventions are the same old folks who always go to these conventions.
No.
What's really different now is there's 200 content creators sitting in the front couple rows of the convention who are live streaming this, who are tweeting this, who are TikToking this, and who are folks with lots of followers who then the next day, if they're not involved in politics, but they love sports, will see a Steve Kerr. Yeah. They will see somebody else talking about that. They will obviously Michelle Obama, Barack Obama. And I think that's the real difference. We keep talking about Latinos are so hard to reach. I think what we're doing here at the convention, what the D.N.C. is doing, is the perfect thing to reach this younger electorate, to at least give them the option to see what are the Democrats even talking about, and do you like it?
I'm always, as a political professional, I'm always intrigued to watch the conventions because they are just such an exercise in the latest communication, best practices. And I think you're exactly right, Chuck, is they're really breaking into pop culture in a way that we have not seen a convention do before. To watch the roll call last night with all the music and Lil Jon, with coming out on the floor of the convention, the influencers that are you're reaching into sports, like you said, with Steve Kerr, or music celebrities with millions and millions of social media followers. This is by design. This isn't just happening. It's not coincidental. It's very structured to get past political Twitter. That small bubble of people that are just focused on convention and who's giving what speech and who's talking about what. This is designed to pop into popular culture, and they're doing a remarkable job. So hats off to the D.N.C. committee and staff. I think the RNC tried it, but they don't have, they've got Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan. It's not the same demographic. And I don't want to take anything from them, at least not too much from them, but it's not the same. It's not the same popular culture figures that they're talking to, that the DNC is talking to. So it is just wild to see how both parties are approaching this so differently, so expertly. And you just got to tip your hat to the DNC to this point, and I'm sure it's only going to get better.
So the next thing is, how does that relate to what effect is it going to have in our community? And I'm going to go back to what I just said and then lead into the question, Mike, with you, with the effect of the Latino vote and what we're seeing now, and is the convention obviously having an effect? The number one thing that I hear in congressional races, Senate races, and I'm lucky to be able to work on lots of these still today at my senior age, where I'm still in the room listening to these conversations, is we're still trying to figure out, we're not getting to all the Latinos who need to hear the message because they're just so hard to reach. Mike Madrid will talk about the difference between Spanish and English network TV buying when it comes to reaching our community. And that's one of the arguments that are made. How much English, how much Spanish? And then when you look at the bifurcation, I'm gonna love, that's my word. How about that? Bifurcation of the media spend. Don't stop me. Let me keep going. The bifurcation of the media spend of how do you go and make your digital buy be somewhere where you can reach Latino voters? Because if your digital buy is put together to reach the white persuadable voter, the 26-year-old Latina or Latino's probably not consuming the same digital content as a 40-year-old white woman in the suburbs. Well, back to these content creators sharing information about the Democrats or about something cool that's happening is one of the new ways to get there. I honestly believe, and I don't think we've talked about this on the podcast, it's just kind of been my latest thing that I haven't tweeted about, but it's been on my mind, is this probably 20% of our electorate being the community that is Latino, Hispanic, biracial, all the things. I just don't think hear the message because they're too infrequent of a voter, A. But B, we still haven't figured out how to target them to a high enough degree if they're not a regular, everyday voter and own a home. They just don't hear from anybody. So they get a little bit from their conservative friends. They hear a little bit from their crazy uncle that makes them more Republican curious. Donald Trump doesn't seem like that bad a guy. So I'd like to get your take on all that. I know it's a lot, Mike, but that's kind of where I've been living on. How do we get to that last point? And is what I'm seeing at the convention one of those ways.
Now, look, it's a great question, and this is probably where I got a little grouchy earlier in the week, and all your friends are saying, "What's wrong with Mike? He's taking his angry pills today." Look, there's a level of sophistication that is just kind of missing in so much of this, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense. I don't mean this in anything other than to try to be constructive, because I want this. Look, I want Kamala Harris to win this race. That's not the easiest thing for a Republican to say, but it's where we're at. There was a little bit of a back and forth with me and some folks on English and Spanish mediums. And everybody immediately, Democrats will immediately say, we need to do everything in Spanish, everything in Spanish. We need to be all inclusive. We need to open up the table, make this bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, no, you really don't. And, everybody kind of piled on Mike Madrid saying, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. This guy, what does he know about Latino voters who only wants to talk to him in English? And then lo and behold, the Kamala Harris campaign launches her tougher ad on the border and border security in, guess what? Only English. It's the only ad Kamala Harris has launched in only English. And I kind of want to, these are those moments I want to walk around the D.N.C. like Caesar coming back from Rome, right? With my crown of olive branches saying, I told you so. It's not just Mike Madrid. You guys want to say it's just this crazy Republican, but here's a Democratic nominee, woman of color out there following Mike Madrid's advice. And I'm saying, I'm getting you all paid. I'm doing this for free, and I'm making you all rich by just giving you guys the right direction here. There is a time and a place to speak to Latinos where they're at. We are not all in the same universe of voters. Some of us are monolingual Spanish. Most of us are monolingual English. The way we target on social media, on broadcast television, on direct mail, all of it, everything that we use, all the tools at our disposal should be used, but we should not be dumping everybody into one petri dish. And as our vote gets more complicated, it's going to make it more difficult. We're going to have to, sharpen our pencils more and refine those targets and those universes even better, Chuck. Than when you and I were kids, it was how much is going into mail, how much is radio, and how much is TV, and that was it. Now we've got a million different choices, and with Latinos, the audience was smaller. It was more monolithic. It was never entirely monolithic, but now it's as complex, even more complex because of the language variation as any demographic out there. And as I like to say with Latinos, we're both the easiest group to identify and the hardest group to identify. And that's where practitioners like yourself, myself, have to really get better every election cycle because it is getting more complex. And I'm just glad that the recognition is there, that people are talking about it, because so much of this was dismissed conventions earlier in our careers that are now front row and center. So it's good to hear, good conversation to be having. It's exactly the right place to be. And again, I'm so happy and honored that Kamala Harris agrees with Mike Madrid. I can't tell you. I'm over there.
I don't know if they're going to put that out in a press release, but I would also say that what Mike is saying about how you talk is really important. Again, with races that we are working on, I'm not going to mention any specific races. When we go into targeting and looking at it from what you see on Twitter is a lot different than what actually happens in paid communication. And this, I'm not talking about Mike Madrid here, but lots of other folks, is that we look at how much of the district is Hispanic, and we're only looking at how much of the district voters are Hispanic, not how much of the general population is. And then we dissect that and look at an average of how many of those voters in polling that we're doing in that district only have been answering questions in Spanish when we try to talk to a large group of people. And it's normally less than half, less than a quarter, all depending where we are. The Central Valley answers polling a lot different than the Southern New Mexico or in New York 22. And so we put out a lot more targeted information to Latinos in English that's targeted where they're consuming English media. Right. A lot of this has to do with direct one-to-one targeting on connected TV, on what they're doing. And then in some cases, we do buy a robust Spanish language buy, like, let's say, for example, in the Central Valley of California, because there's a lot of Spanish consumers. But that's the highest non-college educated class of Latinos of any marginal district in America. To what Mike is saying is really important, because not every district is the same, but in no instance would we just go in and talk to anybody in just Spanish or just English. And if somebody said, well, what's normally the average? I'm like, well, it's like anybody else's life. It's probably 70-30 English, Spanish. It could be as high as 60-40 in a place like the Central Valley, or it could be as low as 90-10 in other places. But you got to know your district. You have to know your Hispanic voters. That's why the bottom line to all of this is, and what Democrats do right or do wrong, and Republicans as well, is normally we don't take the time to nuance any of this, right, Mike? That's where we miss it.
Yeah, that's what we're missing. And I think it's because there aren't that many practitioners who've done this at this level, and everything you just rattled off is, I mean, it's gold. That's just wisdom. That's an old man who's been doing it a long time talking, folks. So listen up, kids, pull up your chair and listen to Chuck Rocha, because he's, just being able to rattle off those regions of the country and knowing the language splits is exactly right. That's what it takes. And there are big variances. Central Valley of California, like you were saying, there's a lot of Spanish-speaking Latino voters there. You go a little bit further down south into northern LA County, Mike Garcia, and you're talking maybe low single digits. This is all suburbanized, district that there's a lot of Latino voters, but they're third, fourth generation, college educated, served in the military or working in white collar professional jobs. They're not watching Spanish language mediums. They're in English. And like I said, there's no more Latina or Latino compared to AOC or Mayra Flores. Their Latinidad is 100% intact. No one's questioning that. But where they live, what they consume, and what they're focused on are completely different things.
Let's move into what a lot of folks have been talking about. Some, I think, in the right way. Some overblowing it, some underestimating it. That's every side of this issue called the Big Mo. And I'm not talking about a batter from the Boston Red Sox. I'm talking about momentum. But the Big Mo. And has the momentum changed? Yeah, me and Mike were doing an off-air conversation before we logged on, saying that it's happening. What we don't know is the momentum real? We both feel like it is. It's real right now. Will it still be there, and at what level in 70 days? We don't know. What effect will that have on Black voters or Latino voters? We have a kind of an idea, because polling's now starting to come back, but also looking at focus groups. I will tell you this, and then I want to get Mike's take, is that momentum is real in presidential campaigns. Mike can give his examples. He actually wrote about some of this in his book. I've seen momentum when people like Joe Biden beat Bernie Sanders on Super Tuesday in 4 states where he didn't have a single staffer, where we had operations, because momentum matters in presidential primaries and in the general. Will the momentum and the popularity of her solidifying the base mean that Kamala Harris is going to get back every bit of the Latino vote that was lost to Donald Trump? We have no freaking idea. We can say that she's done better than where Biden is. We can also all agree that we're nowhere near the numbers we were 8 years ago, 10 years ago. If we start looking at 65-35 numbers, which is the average, some people will go 60-40 to 70-30. I'll do the middle ground of that, because that's more realistic. But do we get close enough to that by election day? Maybe. The real question here, and the real answer is nobody really knows, but there's momentum happening. And if the Kamala Harris campaign is smart, to Mike Madrid's point about running a national security ad in English in Nevada and Arizona, that's one way to start getting those back. Making your campaign look like Ruben Gallego's campaign when you talk about border security is a way to do that. Yeah. But anybody who wants to answer that right now is just blowing smoke up your dress. But pay attention, because there are things happening. I'll stop. Mike Madrid, give me yours.
I think that's a really good overview. So let's talk about this a little bit and kind of where things stand with Latinos in this race. Momentum has clearly shifted to the Democrats, and not slightly. I think it's decidedly. Kamala Harris has consolidated her own base in a way that you would not expect for a candidate to do, especially with the Democrats' weak numbers for the past couple of years. You wouldn't expect these numbers to come together until maybe a month out of the election. We're like 75 days out, and she's not only consolidated the base, she's starting to push into independent vote share and starting to overperform with that black vote. That's very, very critical for the Democrats' chances of success. There is some stubbornness with Latinos, and that does not mean that she can't get back into this historical range that we were talking about. The question is going to be, does that momentum carry on and push? But let me talk about this a little bit because I think it is really important. There's no question that there's been a generational component to this. Latinos, we know, are decidedly younger. 40% of our voters are 30 years of age or younger. I think Biden for them was particularly unrelatable. Kamala has really taken all of that off the table. She's brought all of that back home, and she is almost back to where Biden was in 2020. Look, I've been critical on this on social media too, because the perspective is important. You definitely want her heading in this direction. The Kamala Harris campaign is heading absolutely in the right direction, but we need to be clear-eyed and sober about this because it's so important. There's a long way to go. The Biden 2020 numbers were not good, and that's part of what I'm trying to, I get the spin. Democratic operatives are out there saying, it's a reset, it's a whole new ball game, and it's like you went from terrible news to bad news. Is that good news? I mean, I guess it is, but they are definitely heading in the right direction. But there's a ways to go before this is truly a race that Kamala Harris can feel both more competitive about and actually good about. There's time to do that, and she has adjusted her campaign and the issues focus to do just that. We are seeing polling now just today. I think Voto Latino just put out some numbers from Greenberg, great pollster in the battleground states, showing Trump's ceiling now in the high 20s in the battleground states. Now, this is the first poll I've seen with that, but I'm not surprised by that. That's the numbers where Democrats need to be. High 20s, low 30s. This mid-30s, high 30s stuff is not good. And again, when the Democrats say that it is, I'm going to be the first one in line to call out and say, those are not good numbers, folks. High 20s is good numbers. Low 30s is good numbers. And like I said, and I wrote this in my book, very, very doable if the Democrats make the adjustments and make the commitment. Harris has done both, and the numbers are moving, and there's plenty of time to get there. But that's where the victory margins are at. And I'm watching Trump's numbers. I'm not watching Harris Waltz's numbers. Those don't mean a hill of beans difference. You got to focus on the Republicans' ceiling. When you're sitting at 35, 37, which is where he's been for 2 years, that's not good. You start getting into 29 to 31, that's really good for the Democrats. That's really good for Gallego in Arizona. That's really good for Rosen in Nevada. That's really good for Tester in Montana. That's starting to put the Senate map in play for the Democrats. That's where you need to be. That is possible. We're starting to see some polling, at least the first poll today, push into that territory. And perhaps most importantly, the issues of which the Harris campaign is talking to Latinos and all Americans about are the right issues with the right tone in the right way. I understand it's making some of my Democratic friends uncomfortable. Good. It should make you uncomfortable because where you've been living hasn't been working for 10 years. The possibility of bringing that home is there. And I think it's fascinating that it's a Black woman who's leading the party in pushing them in the right direction on these issues. Chuck, how do you feel about it?
I think there's one point that you didn't mention that needs to be mentioned. And I think it's differentiating in the ways that Democrats are competing for the Latino vote and in places where they're not. Because in places where they're not, I'm going to be really interested to just see what happens organically in a state like Arkansas or a state like I don't know, pick one that's not a battleground state, because there's going to be real money, hundreds of millions of dollars in English and Spanish that's being spent right now. And I'm fortunate I'm getting to do some of this work in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, where I'll just say my firm has been running Spanish language TV and radio, for God's sakes, for an IE there for months. Like, there will be no lack of money spent to try, as Democrats do, and we do it somewhat well. We'll throw a lot of money at this problem. At least my party now acknowledges we had a problem with Latino voters, and we're spending a lot of money trying to fix that problem. Now, what does that mean in a state like California? What does that mean in a state like New York? That's where I'm going to really be watching to see if this Kamala Harris walls Trump stuff, how does that affect 5 congressional races in California and 5 congressional races in New York City, where there won't be that spending, where there's not really a Senate race. Right. There's really not a governor's race. Right. And it's just these House IEs and House candidates that are spending a lot of money as well. But me and Mike would explain that that's nothing compared to a presidential race above you and a Senate race above you, spending tens of millions of dollars in advertising, not just on TV, but in digital. So people have an app to get more information. So you have voters with less information. And then you throw in a California 22, the Central Valley race, where it has the lowest college educated Latino vote in America. And they're non-college educated and not paying attention because they're working 3 jobs or they work in the fields every day. Mm-hmm. Do they really know Kamala? Do they really not like Donald Trump anymore? It could be either one. I'm not saying that in a negative or positive light. Right. We don't know.
That's right.
That's going to be the real difference to watch for me. So when you separate the numbers, I think that we're going to get close to the numbers we normally were at. We're not going to make up all the Trump numbers, I don't think. Unless something crazy happens, and it could happen. We could do just as bad the other way. But there is definitely, if the things continue to move, and I'm privy to polling in some of these battleground places that has definitely showed movement. But separating a presidential battleground state and Senate race from a non is really going to be important when you're looking at this, just because there's a lot of money being spent to talk to lots of voters there, that even the overspill, when you fill up a cup all the way and it runs over both sides, that's what's happening in these battleground states and these TV and digital. You cannot buy, Mike Madrid, any more YouTube advertising in the Philly media market now. It's all sold out. That's everything you wanted to buy.
Yeah.
So if you're that congressional race in Bethlehem trying to reach a Latino voter, you can't even buy any more YouTube.
Yeah, there's nothing left. Already there's no inventory left, and we call it inventory, and we're 75 days out of this thing. This is going to be remarkable. The only thing that's going to be available is going to be texting by phone, which actually, a lot of people oversample on, and then hiring bodies to come in and just work neighborhoods and just canvass and door knock. And I feel bad for those people. If you live in a battleground state in a contested congressional race, you're going to be waking up and someone's going to be serving you, a cup of coffee with their candidate's name on it. You're going to hear about the campaign every waking moment of every day for the next 75 days. But really good observations there on where this is headed with the vote. Look, I will tell you, as we sit here in mid-late August, I believe very firmly that the Harris campaign is sitting at the Trump campaign is sitting at the mid-30s, which again is a higher range for Republicans. But I do believe that it can move down. It can move up. It can it move significantly down? It can. I think the likelihood of the way this race is moving, you could see Trump lose 3-4 points from where he was in 2020. That will have a tectonic impact in not just the presidential race, not just the electoral college, but in who controls the Senate. And I think that if this momentum, and again, 75 days is a lot of time to carry this momentum, but they've been doing it for a month. It doesn't seem to be losing any oxygen. It's moving. We'll see how this goes week after convention, but you'd much rather be Harris in this race than Trump.
Before I move to the next topic, which is like the auxiliary programming and the activists here at the convention and how that relates to battleground states, I want to make sure that the listeners who look to me and Mike in the Latino Vote podcast is a place to get information, understand a thing. And that is, if you look at the Texas Valley and Miami as a barometer of how this went down, you're not going to see that much of a change. There's still going to be an abnormal high spike in those 2 areas because there's just not a lot of money in the market by Debbie Merkelsel-Powell, and I love Debbie, or Colin Allred. I love Colin, but they're the only two people spending any money in those two areas trying to get Latinos to vote for their respective candidates. That has no comparison to a presidential campaign or to others who are spending hundreds of millions. So you may still see some bumps in geographical regions, but pay attention to the battleground states. So back to the auxiliary programming. The other big thing that the convention can do for Latino voters is every Latino activist in America is here in Chicago at the convention. And there's all of this auxiliary programming going on directed at our vote, whether it's Ecky's Lab, whether it's Unidos Action Fund, whether it's Climate Power and their Latino program, which is awesome, by the way. Shout out to our sister Antoinetta. Like, there's a lot of people here bringing lots of information to the masses that really matter to the Latino voter. And so the folks that are here will leave here with all this information, jazzed up to go back into their community to organize our community. And I think that's one thing that goes untalked about a lot, is the grassroots organizing, and almost more important, or as important, is the grassroots fundraising. Over 1 million people have donated to the Kamala Harris campaign since the convention started, which is crazy. And so you're raising this money that, again, can be turned into votes and volunteers. And I think when you go into the states that Mike mentioned, Arizona, Nevada, and others, and then you have all this energy coming out of the convention, then you start hitting at something. Because guess what, girls and boys, men and women, that people will really start tuning in as we get close to Labor Day, which is, I forgot about it till I was talking to my wife this week, that Labor Day is September 2nd. It's already here. Politics used to not start till Labor Day. The presidential campaign's been spending money on campaign ads now for almost a year. Like, we've been in campaign mode, but Mike Madrid has told you, I will tell you, that a lot of Latinos decide late, and a lot of Latinos are going to be first-time voters. And I think that matters coming out of this election. And I think that's why you see so much auxiliary programming. The Harris Walls campaign have developed and put out a WhatsApp channel that they're using to organize Latinos are. And I don't want anybody tweeting at me saying the WhatsApp channel ain't going to matter, just like Spanish TV doesn't matter. All of those things matter at some level. Do they matter to be the one-all be-all? No. But again, it's the hat tip to the community. Our community is on WhatsApp. You should be on WhatsApp. You can say you don't like TikTok. Great. Don't like it, but that's where our people are. They're on TikTok. They're consuming TikTok because their average age is 26. I think that piece coming out of this convention may be more important than the Michelle Obama speech or Barack Obama last night, because folks are in these realms getting ginned up here, getting information at the convention center every day to then take back to their people. Mike, have you thought about that and that piece of how conventions work with grassroots organizing?
Well, the seamlessness with which they do it now is just, it really is impressive. And, you know, this elusive younger demographic has always been a challenge for political campaigns. But let's be really clear. The youth demographic now is the Latino demographic. It was one of the things that I was screaming about 18 months ago, saying, why are we acting like these aren't the same group of people? Again, when 40% of our voters are under the age of 30, yeah, this is where they live. They're online. It's on mobile. They're not reading their mail, the correct mail, right? They're not watching cable news the way that 65 plus voters are. You've got to speak to people where they're at. And like I said, this is the most diverse generation of Americans to ever come of age, driven largely by the Latinization of America. And so the way we campaign, the way we communicate is fundamentally different. And it does seem for the moment that there is at least been some very significant strides that have been made. So kudos again to the Democrats. I think they're having a great convention. I think things are off to a really good start. So, I think some fireworks tonight.
Let me ask you this. This will be we should start wrapping it up. So you should know that tonight, I've got some events today with Unidos. I've got some other, I'm going to try to get for you and Andreas some voice notes from people, because some folks have come up to me, again, talking about how much they love the podcast and our information. A woman come up and grabbed my neck. She goes, "I'm y'all's biggest fan." And I was like, "I'm a married man now, woman. You can't be just coming up and hugging me around my neck like that." But I would like to know what you want to hear. And this is my wrap up here with you, Mike, and then I'll close this out. But what do you want to hear tonight? And more importantly, tomorrow night, from our nominee, from Tim Walz tonight, and then the nominee tomorrow night? What are you looking for, and what should people be tuned into? And we'll talk about our reaction next Wednesday when we record. But I want to know what you're looking to hear tonight from Tim Walz and tomorrow night from Vice President Harris.
That's a great question. Let me set it up by saying this, and I observed this last night in watching some of the speeches and listening to the crowd. And it is remarkable to hear a D.N.C. crowd with the USA, USA chants kind of taking away this peculiar, fascination that Republicans have, thinking they own these things. They own the flag. They own the USA chants. Watching the Democrats and even Barack Obama's speech last night coming in with this very optimistic, confident notion of who America is, especially on the world stage, this again idea of American exceptionalism. I thought I was watching the Republican convention in the 1980s. And to watch the Republican convention where it's dour, dystopian, angry, blaming America first, talking about what a wreck. Again, it looked like the Democrats in the 1980s. These parties have completely changed their perspectives on America and her role in the world. And I'm with the party of optimism and confidence, regardless of which one it is, about the idea that America, despite her faults, is a inherently good country that does inherently good things with inherently good people. And I'm particularly enthused by that when I see the complexion of our country changing and the DNA changing, and those that have the least evidence to believe that America has been a good and great place are those that are leading the charge. There's something romantic about that. There's something epic about that. There's something inspiring about that. And to me, that's what is happening in our community is so important. And so I'm looking for the political reality of bringing in these tough on crime issues, which the prosecutor Kamala Harris is going to bring. I'm looking for the tougher on border security messaging. I've absolutely loved the housing. Mike Madrid's out there saying you need a Marshall Plan for housing. Bring it. Bring the kitchen sink on it. Kamala Harris drops this beautiful housing plan. They're doing all of the right things, but they're not just dropping the policy. They're doing it in hopeful, optimistic, confident terms that aren't hateful. You can be for border security without being racist, and you should be, by the way. You can be pro-immigrant without being for open borders. You can be pro-working class and build things like bridges and roadways and houses. This is 1980s republicanism. I know that may not sound comfortable to a lot of Democratic delegates, but that's what this is. This what we are hearing in policy and substance, with our role in the world, with consolidating NATO, with taking on the Russians. This is Reagan republicanism in all of its conservative, optimistic, best self. And it's why I'm not just supporting this ticket at this point in time. I'm excited about what they're doing. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for reasonable, middle of the road policy that the Democratic Party is seeming to embrace more wholeheartedly as a matter of conscience, as opposed to political expediency. And I don't care which party banner it's under, as long as they believe that America is an inherently good place, that left to our devices, we will do the right thing. Maybe not always at first, but we will get there. And that we are still a beacon of hope in the world. And I saw that in Obama's speech last night, and I'm expecting to see it with both Walz and Harris tonight.
I think that's such a good way to look at this, and I couldn't agree more. That's what I'm looking at tonight. I think Obama set the table on that. This country, and me and Mike Madrid are an example of that. There's much more in this country that brings us together than what divides us, but we're all focused on what divides us, not on what brings us together. Barack Obama talked about his white grandmother and Michelle Obama's mother, who had both passed over the last few years, Michelle Obama soon, and how they couldn't be more different geographically from where they came from or the color of their skin, but how they were such good people and had such good values, but were from two different sides of the world. I think about that with my two grandmothers that I wrote about in my book. Evelyn Bustle, a white woman who grew up through the Depression on a little farm in East Texas, and my grandma Carmen Rocha, who raised 15 kids. Like, these two old ladies were the bedrock of my life when I was young, and they could not be more different. They have never had cross paths, but they taught me, just like Mike's grandmother taught him, like the values of what this country should have. And so what I'm looking for tonight is those things relate with the Latino community, because we're such an aspirational younger generation of people who think that they can finally buy that house. That's why Mike Madrid is housing all the time. That think they can finally maybe own a small business or do all the things. So I want Tim Walz to be the football coach that we send our kids to every day to teach in high school that makes him relatable. I want the vice president to talk about how she had to live in a rent apartment until she was in high school, when her family finally got to buy a house, and she never forgot what that feeling was like, for the pride in her mother's eye to actually be able to own a house. Just like when the Madrids got to move outside of LA. I read his book, and like, comes through in the words of what that means for a family to own something. That's relatable to the Latino community. And that's what I want to hear them, because that, coupled with Mike talking about border security or the other policy things, I think it's those life experiences of this brown girl who came from an immigrant mama, who lived in this place and then got to own these things, and then go be a prosecutor, and then go on and be and then be a U.S. senator. And oh my God, now she gets to be the president. Like, that's the kind of shit grandmothers eat up in our community. And Mike has told all of you, the grandmothers run our families, the mothers run our families, and that's who you need to impress tonight and tomorrow night on the couch. Right, Mike?
I think that's a great way to look at it, brother. That's, that last part was exactly right. Last bit of free advice for the Democratic Party: the way you stop Latino men from moving to the Republican Party is start using use our women as messengers. Have them be that's how you stop this. That's how you limit it. That's how you get them. Is we are a maternally focused culture. We just are.
Yep.
And that's the secret power that we have as a people, as a community. And whoever taps into that, I think, is going to yield the results. So go get back to convention, brother. Bring us home.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget to like and share us. Coming to you live from Chicago. I'm going to try to get back to Washington, D.C. on Friday and actually spend a week in my house that I pay for in Washington, D.C. Me and Mike Madrid will be back next week. I'll try to get some live recordings of folks saying good things about Mike at the convention so that I can show him he does have 4 friends here. But for all of you, don't forget to call your mama. Don't forget to tune in. Don't forget to share. Until next week, we're out.